Hey everybody, Pete A. Turner, executive producer and host of your Break It Down show. Today's guest is Jay Tuthill. Now look, when I first started talking with some of his employees, and we'll get to Jay in a second here, I met Chad, Gabriel, and Vito Pellicano. Both of those episodes are linked in the show notes. You can go to breakitdownshow.com and you can find their episodes there. And they both work on a project that Tuthill sponsors called Search for Aliveness, where they go around the world and they look for what they call aliveness. Now, we've talked about this topic a number of times. And each time I talked to these guys, to Chad in his own episode and Vito in his, it dawned on me that Jay was doing something different, something special. Yes, the search for aliveness is important, but the culture that he was creating, and anybody who knows me knows that I'm big on CQ and culture, and it's one of the things that I do for work is to advise companies and corporations on culture. When I can hear Vito and Chad truly light up when talking about their workplace. Think about how rare that is, where someone's like, oh my God, yeah, we have the best environment. Even if you want to leave and do something else, we find the best way to get you to that next step so you can truly be alive. And I had to talk to Jay to get his philosophy on this, because that doesn't make sense for a guy that owns a manufacturing company. But sure enough, we had him on the show, and Jay talks extensively about how he takes his father's approach, which for the time was appropriate. It was a command and control, a C2-based environment approach. And he said, I'm not going to do that. That doesn't work for me. That isn't the corporation that I want to create and run. And so he started to look at CQ, the intelligence, the cultural intelligence, the cultural acuity part of it. It's one thing to say, oh, we're going to create this culture within our corporation. It's a whole nother thing to be willing to slow down, to do it right, and to measure it. And one of the ways you measure it is have guys like Vito saying, oh my God, it's the best place to work for these specific reasons. When I can hear through these other employees the hallmarks of what Jay has put out culturally, that stands out and is exceptional. And I think you guys will all appreciate what Jay has to talk to us about. And also, by the way, about 2 weeks ago, we put up our episode, Bob Taylor, who makes guitars. And these are corporate leaders who are doing something special to make the world a better place through their corporation. And I'm all about supporting that and exploring that topic. We'll be doing more of that in the future. All right, listen, if you do like what we do, here's what you can do for me. Share the show. Tell a friend about the show. Put a Facebook post up. That would be fantastically helpful. Find an episode that you love, even if it's an older one, and share that show. If you want to find a back catalog show, hit me up, Pete at breakitdownshow.com. I'll give you some to try out. You let me know which ones you like. I'm always interested in what you think. I'm always interested in your guest ideas. I do my best to get everybody that I can that makes sense for the show. One more thing to bring up. Save the Brave, savethebrave.org. You know what to do. Here comes Jay Tuthill.
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Proops.
This is Jordan Harbinger.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This is
East.
Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick Marotta.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
Hey, this is Skunk Baxter.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
Well, hi, this is Jay Tuthill on the Break It Down show.
And I really love that we get a chance to do this. We've had Chad Gabriel on, we've had Vito Pellicano on, and now we have the boss man. We have Jay Tuthill of the Tuthill Corporation, and he's going to talk to us about his company, the culture that he's created, his ideas about mindfulness, and how you take care of the people around you and look beyond the corporation. And we're exploring this because, and really you guys should go listen to those other two episodes and learn about their project called The Search for Aliveness. But the reason why I wanted to bring Jay on is as I study culture, from being in Iraq or Afghanistan or working for corporations to help them understand their culture, I don't often come across employees that reflect the culture so powerfully, Jay. This is just a big question to start us off, and we'll dig in deep, but how does it make you feel that you inspired me to reach out to you based upon the comments and the engagement that Chad and Vito displayed?
Oh boy. Well, it makes me feel good, of course. It's another of the signposts along the road that, even on the bad days, we can look at those little signs that we come by, and it confirms we're going in a good direction.
Yeah, that direction is hard to accomplish. Let's talk a little bit about. Let's go back. Let's talk a little bit about Tuthill's origin and how you became, the guy on the outside of the building. You took it over from your dad, right?
I did. I'm actually fourth generation.
Wow.
And, a very simple way to summarize my earlier years of leadership were, I was trying not to screw things up and unconsciously trying to do things like my father did things. He's an ex-Army West Point guy, command and control, kind of typical, I guess, for his generation. And you know what? It took me way too long, but I finally figured out it wasn't working for me.
How did you figure that out? I mean, that's how you grew up. That's, very much to this day, C2, command and control. That's how you run things. Talk about some of your learning points where you're like, this isn't my way of doing this.
I always had a picture of myself as, kind of a smart guy and approachable and possibly even intuitive. And I may have been all those things, but coming at it from the perspective that, I had to have the right answer all the time. And I had to be the smartest guy in the room. And, all these ideas had to come from me. And when it wasn't going that way, I'd get scared. I'd say, again, not consciously, but somewhere deep in the gremlins, I'm giving myself the message, you're losing control. You got to ramp it up. You've got to prove that you can command these people. And, I don't think that works great in the military. I know it doesn't work very well out there in the civilian world. And so I had some very rough moments. And you know what? It's very closely connected to our entire Aliveness program, because I had to finally, and I had some help, believe me, had to finally come face to face with the fact that authenticity, my score was really low.
Yeah. Yeah, I worked as a lost and not very happy salesperson at CDW. You're probably familiar with them. They're a Midwestern company.
Sure.
And one day, Michael Krasny, the guy that built these things with his bare hands, started selling computers out of magazines and realized it just kept going. And he's there and he's yucking it up with all these people and serving us lunch, trying to be a man of the people. And I just, I'll take the free lunch because I can't afford it to not to. But I look at him and I think this guy's no idea how disconnected I am from the vision he thinks, like I'm so, and then they had a thing called inclusion training, which made me feel even more excluded from the company, and so and look, the guy wasn't a bad guy. It's just, he had this vision of what was going on. And I knew all of us, who were on the sales floor and how grinding the experience was. And it's okay to make it hard, but it wasn't hard. It was miserable. And if you want to make your people miserable, you're going to lose really good people. And sure enough, when I look around my peers 20 years ago at that company, a lot of them are very, very, very senior positions in other professions that are akin to his. And so that's all that talent that just left, in part because of, the day-to-day apathy about our well-being.
Well, I know in my case, Pete, I hired a personal coach because, frankly, I didn't know what the heck else to do.
Okay.
And I figured a personal coach was somehow about business. Well, it turns out she was way more capable than that. And it's really about a life coach. And in my case, her two favorite words from the very beginning were awareness and responsibility. You got to be able to see yourself, got to be able to see how others are reacting to you, and you got to take your share of the responsibility for doing something about it if you don't like what you see. And that really was the beginning of what was at first a very, very intense personal process, and kind of ouchy at times. And sometimes one of those signposts would come along, and it would make a big impact on me. And so all of a sudden I started talking with my team at work and talking about, this kind of what for me was really a new understanding of authenticity. And And I thought, how can we do this? Because selfishly, I want to live in a place where authenticity is the norm.
Yeah.
I want to work at an office where that's the case. I mean, it was like, I don't know if we can pull this off, but man, how cool would that be?
Yeah.
And so we started pulling that apart. What is it? And, got to the point where it was really clear to all of us that if you want authenticity, you gotta look inside first.
Okay, so authenticity is a bit of a buzzword, though, right? Like, ramping up and peeling the onion and all these kind of things that we say. So it's really easy to say that and have your coach say you need to be authentic, but like no fooling when those road signs come up. And the way I see these things is you can't look directly at the problem because you won't see the obvious solution or entry point, right? You're coming at it too direct with too much ego in it. You have to sort of have these road signs that indicate, hey, there may be a problem over here. And if authenticity is one of them, how were you even able to see that? Or what did your coach bring out in you and say, this seems like this is ego? Like you continue to say I, me, my, instead of us and them and, and celebrating other things. So authenticity is a great goal, but how in the world do you achieve it?
Yeah, here's the simple fact about it.
Uh-huh.
As soon as you try to achieve it, it's not authentic.
Right, exactly.
It's really crazy.
It is.
And
I liken it to like the drunk guy in the bar, like, I'm not drunk. Like the first guy to say they're not drunk is the drunkest guy in the bar,
Yeah. Yep, it's like that. And so what she was really good for me about doing was she would catch me being authentic, and she'd stop whatever we were talking about. And she said, there, that last 15 seconds, you didn't think about it. You just expressed it, and it came from somewhere deep inside.
Yeah.
And that was an amazingly powerful tool for me, and I've shared that with others, because if we think really hard, it's by definition going to come from an ego place.
Yeah.
And if we just let it happen, and then we start getting familiar with what that feels like, to just let it happen and just be me, it's like, oh, I know that feeling. I'm going back there.
Yeah, it's a feeling. And also, I think for me, and this goes just in my general work as I teach people how to run podcasts and do interviews, when you slow down and truly hear what you're saying, the words coming out of your mouth and you're processing them just a click before they come out, you start to drop the ums and the ahs, and you get to be a lot more direct because you're just taking a more measured approach to it. And that ego lives in that initial approach instead of the measured, right? And so you want to say something, and let me make sure I ask this question because I need to feel good about it. And then I realize that's not the right question. The question is about, the guest. How do I make the guest's specific knowledge shine? So what are some of the things you would hear yourself say as you started to tune this machine and go measured and then immediate, or however I don't know how you even balance it. I don't want to assume that, but talk about that process between, the detune and attuning your approach and your words and your actions.
Well, I'm going to go back to self-awareness. And, this is funny. I mean, a little strange, but our listeners may be able to relate to it. Again, I followed my father in business. I followed a lot of his example. He was a very successful guy. And it turns out that I'm much more like my mother. and I really am more comfortable in kind of the human, emotional, intuitive, connected sort of a way. And that may give you a little bit of an idea why I didn't do so well in the command and control world. And so really, once I got accustomed to that feeling, and I could then begin to trust that feeling, all of a sudden, I didn't have to have the answer. I maybe had to have the right question, and I could participate in the formulation of the answer, but it would be the best answer that the group could come up with in that moment. And so we're striving for the best, not defending my turf.
Right. Okay.
Really big difference.
Yeah. Wow. That's a man. I love that. That's so good. I'm not even going to ask another question on that because I think you just perfectly captured it. Let's talk a little bit about dignity because you said that, as we were talking off mic, and I think dignity is such an important thing. I one of the things I try to preach is, you should search and collect for joy. And I'll ask someone like, when was the last time you just had uproarious joy, like arms above the head, like, oh my God, and it's easy to find the anger, right? Like, oh, I was so mad at the airport last night when I was flying, right? It's easy to do that, but that joy in collecting that and then creating dignity and defaulting to grace, these are things that, look, I just don't know that the negatives are in any way outweigh the positives of just defaulting to grace all the time. Now, sometimes you can't be graceful. Sometimes you have to really blast somebody or whatever. But what if you did that by design as opposed to by reaction,
Yeah, let's acknowledge up front. The clock on the wall tells us a lot about the range of tools we have at our disposal. If we're coaching somebody and trying to get them to live into their true self, that's a project that takes months and often years. But if we're trying to avoid getting hit by the bus in the next 32 seconds, a lot of that stuff just falls away and we go right to action.
Right.
And it's really important to remember. I mean, it's obvious, of course, but it's really important to remember so we don't get stuck with only one tool at our disposal. That's not real life. But you asked about dignity.
Yes.
Now, let me turn that around and ask you.
Sure.
What human being, when they're born, doesn't deserve dignity?
Yeah, I mean, they all do, right? They all do. Absolutely.
Well, yeah. I mean, and of course, as we go through life, we may give up our right or forfeit our right to dignity by the choices we make. But let's take that as an outlier and focus on the mainstream. And, how can any of us feel alive if we can't see that birthright of dignity? How can we do that? Really, creating dignity, I think the first step is showing the grace of granting that dignity to this person, which is really the first step in creating some space for them that maybe they've never enjoyed before, a safe space where they can begin to maybe flap their wings a little bit and start drying them out and start getting ready for that next step, which might be actually lifting off and flying a little bit and onward. And so I just think dignity is really the entry point for what we're trying to do here.
Yeah.
Create space, and we invite folks to eventually fly away and become exactly the person they were put here to be.
Man, that is so powerful to take that approach to things. I mean, you think about, the same kind of question, like what person doesn't want to be a little better, doesn't want to impress their boss, doesn't want to do a great job, that everybody wants to do those things. But if we smash them down all the time, if we only have negative, input for them, they're like, why am I bothering flapping my wings? Apparently I suck. Again, back to my time at CDW, and I'm not trying to bash these guys, but, they're a very big corporation and they had these problems my boss would tell me all the reasons why I sucked and the numbers on the wall would indicate that I sucked, but I could do math. And I'm like, hey man, don't tell me I suck. You're taking the net gravy money that I create here. And over the course of a year, I cover 4 people's salaries by myself. So I might be the worst guy on the floor, and I wasn't, but I might be the worst guy on the floor, but don't tell me I'm terrible because I can add. There's 1,000 salespeople in this building, like it wasn't authentic, and it totally denied me dignity. It's like I had no chance to ever meet my goal. And when I did, it was like, well, that's your job. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is soul crushing. And you can't have your soul crushed and have dignity at the same time. It's courageous though, man. It's courageous to let dignity drive what you do. Again, like how do you get to that spot?
my favorite answer to that question is, in my earlier days, we had a heavy machining plant in Ohio, and some of the biggest and most complex screw machines I've ever seen. And way in the back of the building, literally in the corner of the building, were the two biggest machines and the biggest operator in the whole building. A big, powerful man with a full beard and a rather gruff demeanor. Now, if you can picture this, right?
Yeah.
Well, so here I come walking through, and, I'm the visiting guy from Chicago with name on building and all that stuff. And he wasn't very interested in talking to me. In fact, he'd see me and he'd go hide behind his machines. I actually got him to talk, but not much. And I just couldn't forget this guy. I mean, we're no longer associated with that business. And I hope he's still there and hope he's prospering in however he may define it. But I just hated the idea of being the guy running the company where it just seems so dead-ended. And, come on. He didn't seem to express a huge amount of drive to make things different. I mean, he was pretty good at his job, I was told, but it just felt so dead-ended to me, and I wanted to do something about it. And, it kind of gets back to aliveness and dignity. I wanted to be a place where people could become their dreams and hopefully have a very successful career and a healthy family all at the same time. And moping around and, being surly at work all the time is probably not a good foundation for walking in the door at 4:00 and greet your family.
Yeah.
So, and I knew damn well. I mean, we have a saying, you may have heard it from Chad and Vito, but, we don't want just your hands, talking about a machinist, for example.
Right.
We want your head and we want your heart. We want all three. Wow.
Yeah.
Now think about that. Think about using this guy's, I'm back to my big screw machine operator. Think about using all of his experience, all of his talents, and getting his heart and his head along with those things. I mean, that's unbeatable.
Yeah.
That's unbeatable. And that is, I guess, my long-winded answer of why the heck do I think this is good capitalism?
Yeah. Well, and thanks for doing my job for me. I was going to take us right to that spot, because this guy literally was at the end of the building, in a dead end. And so here's the thing that I like to do. So I'm overseas, I'm working in a complex place, and I've got a leader, and I'm trying to tease them out, but not dominate them, So very easy for a command and control based, thinker to say, here we go, we're going to do this, and then we're going to do that, and here's this big blue arrow of operations that's going to lead to your success, Muhammad, and then it never works, man. So I would say, okay, I have to get my ego out. And I made these mistakes, Jay, I made these mistakes daily. I'm like, God dang it, that's me again. I've got to let them do it. I've got to, and it took me months to learn how to get this one guy to crack open. This is me working at my best. Like the system worked, but now I was tinkering and fine tuning and polishing and making it really pretty. And I still made mistakes all the time. So one of the things I like to do is get my partner up and out of the building and in their space. Like in this case, it was walking up and down the main street of this town that used to be and wasn't at the time. And keep in mind now, this is all paralleled by the Army's desire to say, hey, we're going to rebuild this bazaar. We're going to put money into it. We're going to make it alive again. And I would see people brief all the time on the status of this thing. And I'd be out there like, there's nothing but clay buildings out here, right? And so I needed to see what he thought it was going to look like. And so I walked him down this street and I'm like, well, what's here? What's there? Who's the guy that's going to run this place? And he had answers for all this. And a lot of times he knew the guy because he knew the guy that used to run it. And he's like, I'm going to have this guy running this place again one day. And what he didn't need was millions of American dollars. He didn't want there to be a sewing machine factory. He's like, this place is already accounted for. So a whole different view of what that was going to look like, and it's a capitalist answer, by the way, was by getting him to describe where he was going so I could now get in line with his vision and keep the Army from overpowering his vision and just say, look, these are these small areas where he needs our help because he needs expertise, or maybe he needs some garbage, literally garbage, our waste to make these things happen and to nudge us towards this thing. This is kind of a long-winded explanation, but this is akin to what you're talking about, where letting that person have that vision to describe where they were going, and now I'm provisioning a vision. I don't have to provision the whole thing. I just have to worry about like where they're at in that immediate moment, and not get 15 steps or 15 miles ahead of them, and just go, let's work right here where the rubble is. Let me help you pick up some of these rocks. Does that make sense?
Sure, it does. That it kind of gets back to something I'd mentioned earlier, which is, that the command and control guy is going to have an answer, but almost by definition, it's a suboptimal answer.
Right.
And so what you were taking that walk in search of the best answer with all the complexities woven into it. And you got to be open to that, or you fritter it away.
Yeah. And what you realize when you do this walk and you avoid the frittering is he had a tavern that used to be there. And of course, because we were in the middle of nowhere. So you finally get to the beginning of the middle of nowhere. You need a place to sit down. Maybe hole up for the night. It's a cold place, and so the Army had never even thought to brief about a tavern or a hotel. And I say hotel, let's be honest, it's going to be some rolls on the floor, but that's how they do it out there. But when I was able to bring that back to the command and say, do you guys realize there's going to be a Motel 6 and it's already there and he already knows the guy that used to run it? Like, oh my God, now we're talking about something that is a lot easier to provision because now we can see the franchise and we can look for ways to get involved in that process, but not in a way that also, by the way, if you do it too fast, the Taliban's like, hey, you're working with the Americans and now we're going to at least, make your life difficult, if not make your life end. So these are dangerous, complex problems, but it was always more about how they wanted to approach it and what they saw. I want to get back into the capitalism side of things. We have Bob Taylor from Taylor Guitars on, and he is an impassioned environmentalist. And, his industry, they pull exotic woods like ebony and koa out of Hawaii and out of the coast of Africa. And, the social responsibility of doing that in a way that makes sense, that's fair trade with the folks there, that doesn't encourage piracy like amongst themselves to go out and bring ebony in illegally, and just was super passionate about getting this right. I then started talking about the ancient wood. Like, imagine in a town like Chicago or Minnesota, all these old trees that are 100 years old at some point have to come down. Why not, if you're going to sequester carbon, why not leave it sequestered in that tree and turn it into a table, a countertop, a guitar, instead of just sending it somewhere to get chipped up and turned into mulch or firewood somewhere. And so all of these things, but this came from someone who's got a very, an industry leading brand, and he's passionate about this. I don't know that there's a better mechanism than having someone who runs a company and saying, this is where we're going to improve the world. Just at our little spike on the chart, this is what we're going to do better than anybody else. That's sort of what I see about the value of capitalism. You're creating dignity in your employees so they can go out and do what they need to do. I think that's incredible.
Well, anybody that can make guitars as lovely as Taylor, ought to be a smart guy. So I'm happy to hear your story.
Yeah.
Gosh, just open up the paper, and it's easy to read examples of capitalism that's not the product of larger thinking, but it's the product of rather smaller, rather selfish thinking. And so, capitalism gets a rap, and sometimes that rap is accurate. But I think when we breathe humanity into capitalism, and we make it, hey, wait, these are profit-making ventures. We better make profits or we go out of business. So I'm not going to badmouth profits at all. But there are so many different ways to go after profits, to have a thriving business so that you can then perhaps be successful enough that you can invite others to thrive, some of them inside your business and some of them in their own lives. And that's, we're lucky enough to be able to do that now. But, honestly, you asked me what are some of my bigger, longer goals. It's to get rid of the selfishness in capitalism. It's a short-minded approach anyway. And God, I'm way from the first guy to ever say that. I just believe it works. And I think I've got a bunch of examples that says capitalism, well executed, does exactly what Taylor Guitars is doing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. You also said something else that I'm passionate about is, like with my show, I try to create value. I asked you, like, what can we get out of this show for you so there's value in this for you? And in turn, that makes value for the audience because they're hearing, a new approach. Maybe it's the same words. Maybe we've said the same words that everybody else has said, but it's in a way that somebody else hears it and it sticks for them. So, I'm always looking for value. You're talking about creating value in your company through profit, but also you're doing it through people. And I would submit that, and I think you basically have said this, like if someone goes somewhere else and they're a valuable person, that's a KPI, that's a performance indicator that you guys are creating valuable people. And even if they've got their path is to go somewhere else, they should go there and do whatever that thing is. Who knows why they have to move or leave or whatever. But if you're able to reliably create people that have a ton of value for any corporation they go to, it takes the Tuthill brand and name and elevates it because it's like anybody you can get out of Tuthill. Then you have the problem of people recruiting your people all the time. But yeah, I'd be okay with that problem.
Well, it's I gotta ask you about accountability.
Sure.
And this connects. Just bear with me here. When I say the word accountability, what comes up inside of you?
Accountability to me is like to my mission, to my people. Am I doing what I'm supposed to do to balance my ledger? If I'm not a pro, am I working on being a pro? Am I reading books? Am I constantly improving? By family, am I working hard enough to do what I need to do for them? That's my accountability. That's where I go. Hey, this is Pete A. Turner from Lions Rock Productions. We create podcasts around here. And if you, your brand, or your company want to figure out how to do a podcast, just talk to me. I'll give you the advice on the right gear, the best plan, and show you how to take a podcast that makes sense for you, that's sustainable, that's scalable, and fun. Hit me up at pete@breakitdownshow.com. Let me help. I want to hear about it. That's my accountability. That's where I go.
Okay, well, just the energy with which you said that. I mean, you go to a pretty healthy version of accountability. Now, I got to tell you, growing up with my dear father, I was very conditioned to being held accountable, and it was never pleasant. I'm not saying I didn't deserve it,
right?
But it was accountability, like getting stepped on. And one of the more important discoveries for me in this whole process of bringing aliveness inside our company is to find a completely different approach, a different energy for holding people accountable. And just imagine a performance review going something like this. Well, John, I see of your 5 quantifiable goals that we're not doing very well, and we're gonna talk about that.
Yeah.
But what I want you to listen for in my criticism here, John, is I know when you choose to stand over here and be that guy, you can nail these things without even working too hard. But for reasons I don't understand, you don't stand over there. You stand way over here. And from there, it's a real effort to be effective. And so, okay, we've got the evidence, something's not fitting. Let's talk about it, okay? If I can help you stand in that first place where you're so powerful and capable, I'm going to do that. So, and then John says, you know what? I don't like to stand over here because that's not who I really am. I want to stand in this place where I don't have to talk to people and tell them what to do. And that conversation ends up in a place where we agree, and I literally mean agree, that for what you want, you're either in the wrong job or you're at the wrong company. So let's change this conversation to finding something that is really going to make your heart sing, John, because if it doesn't sing, it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for us. And so that's a different take on accountability than I will promise you I grew up with.
Yeah.
And, so we've invited people to start looking for a job outside the company because my favorite example is you want to write children's books. And we're just not going to be able to help you with that, but we can sure help the transition.
Yeah. So what does that transition look like? I'm sure the audience is dying to know. So Pete comes in and says, I want to write children's books. I don't want to run this machine as a machinist anymore. How does Tuthill help?
Well, I'll tell you how I want it to be, and I'm not going to tell you it always works this way.
Of course.
But what I encourage our folks to do is say, all right, look, I'm going to, when do you see this happening? We kind of agree on a target schedule.
Yeah.
So that allows us to make sure we've got, backups ready in the queue, what have you. And you know what, if you want to take Fridays off, to further your job search, you know what, we can plan around that. We'll do that. And, but let's agree that, by May 15th, we're going to have to just go ahead and make this happen. And that's probably good for you too, to have a deadline out there. And, John says, yep, okay, got it. Let's go.
Do you try to connect them to an outside resource? Like I'm really big on, like you need to find a mentor, someone 2 or 3, 7 levels above where you're at in your desired industry. Do you try to link people into resources like that?
Sometimes we may have a connection. If it's as far afield as children's books, probably not.
Right, fair enough.
But that's where it's so important for people to understand that, for them to really be in control of their lives, they've got to take the responsibility for that.
Yeah. I mean, it's as simple as that person. And in a lot of ways, that person has to reach out because they've got to find someone they're inspired by, not someone that you think they might be inspired by. It might work when you recommend someone, but really it is that person carrying that water to that location and saying, this is the water I brought, and it really is on them. This sort of brings us naturally to the point of talking about this aliveness, the search for it. And first off, this is expensive, man. I mean, the cost to send a film crew to a foreign country, to edit and take all this time, you're paying your people to create this thing. Why on earth would you do that? But more importantly, why is it so important to you to do that?
Oh man, this could be a long answer. Let me see if I can be smarter than that. But all right, first of all, let's tackle the obvious. One of the audiences for this film is absolutely our own people. So let's call those the inside audience. Mm-hmm. Why is that important? Well, honestly, I want them to see in lots of different examples what we're trying to create. And, they may have a number of good examples in their plant. I certainly hope that they do. But to see this out in the bigger world, just good information. And with the message, hey, we're serious. And
right.
Please join us. If you haven't yet tossed your hat in the ring, now's a good time. Second audience is a very humbling number of, 8 billion people. All we can hope to do there with a touch as light as a video, all we can do there is hope to ignite a little spark of possibility in somebody that their heart already wants it, but their mind maybe hasn't permitted that. And if we can provoke that spark, that's a good beginning. And our humble, our purpose, wake the world.
Right.
The first time, I didn't come up with that. I've forgotten exactly who did, but first time I heard it, I went running for the hills. I mean, here we are, a mid-sized manufacturer based in Chicago. Who the hell are we to be claiming that as our purpose?
Right.
And of course, with a little seasoning, it's a hell of an exciting thing to say and just watch people's faces. So, and the other thing about the search for aliveness is it gives all of us a chance to expand our understanding and hopefully start building some muscles in the area. So, it underpinning it all is my belief the world is hungry for meaning, and I got to say they're hungrier today than they were a year or 2 or 3 ago. And aliveness is all about meaning.
Yeah. The way that I see this project as you describe it is, there are a lot of people out there and you want to wake the world or illuminate, the world to things because, it's easy to be wrapped up in our own personal fear. You're on the edge of this, I want to write children's books cliff, and you'd be crazy to jump off. But and let me say this in the best way I can. Try here. You have to jump off a cliff to do that. Like, you shouldn't start a podcast and try to make that your profession. That's crazy. Look at all the problems that come with that, how challenging it is. Like, you'd never would advise someone to do that, except for, there are torches out there. There are little Search of Aliveness video kind of things where you're like, I really maybe can do this. And you guys are sort of illuminating and getting rid of the darkness so that the fear can be reduced and the person might overcome that fear and take that jump that they need to make to go for that thing that truly does enrich their life. And by trying to wake the world or enrich lives, you're illuminating things that are way far afield from where someone is. We had Andy Summers on the show, and he's a guitarist for the Police, and that's what he was known for 40 years ago. But that's his most notable work. And I was able to ask him, because he's a photographer, he's a spoken word guy, obviously a musician, who's in front of you artistically? And he's like, it doesn't work like that. I'm the artist. No one's in front of me. I'm going in my direction. And those people that like what I do, they follow me because that's my job. I have the vision and I push it as hard as I'm able to push it. And that's sort of what you guys are doing. You've got this artistic approach to saying, hey, look at me over here, way out here in left field. It's pretty cool out here, Maybe you can do this too. And whatever this is, up to the person. But I that's my vibe for how you guys are approaching this. And when I watch the videos, I see these incredible stories that look, first off, I'm a big affect over effect guy. You watch the videos, you have to have an impacted emotional response because the videos are wonderfully crafted, and the stories you guys tell, you really are waking the world.
I want to tell you a quick story. I think one of the very most difficult positions we have in our society here in the United States, obviously it exists elsewhere, but I'm really thinking domestically here, is the mom who has a full-time job outside the house.
Oof. Yeah.
And, so she works her butt off all day long and goes home and works her butt off until she falls into bed and then gets up and does it all again. And one of the central measures of aliveness that we use is, are you pursuing your wants, your personal wants? In fact, do you even understand what your personal wants are? Those things that you'd like to be involved with and like to accomplish that just make your heart pump stronger than hell. And I remember we were in a retreat setting, and a classic example of this earnest young mom who was just getting burned out. We started talking about, what do you want in life, and how can you design a plan that brings you ever closer to your central wants. And she was very upset with me. I was holding this out as the keys to the castle, and she finally just came out and said in a rather direct manner, that is the most selfish, self-righteous question I've ever heard. I am so busy taking care of others at this stage in my life. There's no place for a selfish thought in me. What the hell are you talking about?
Yeah.
Can't you understand that? Doesn't sound like a recipe for long-term success, but can't you understand that?
Yeah.
So anyway, in the conversation, not just with me, but over the course of a three-day retreat, we got her understand or admit to some degree that if she was not able to find ways to charge her own battery, it was going to get increasingly difficult to be there for her loved ones or for her job. But and I got to say, I still run across this woman, and this is some 10 years later, and I can't claim much credit for this at all. Whatever she's done it. But she smiles in a way she didn't used to. She's been promoted. She's got a job that could have landed more heavily upon her, but she seems to be able to handle it very well. And, gosh, that's just a little story, but don't you want that for everybody?
Boy, yeah. Yeah. And what a great example. I mean, I love the hell out of moms and respect like everything that they do because it's special, And you're right. If they don't invest even a little bit in themselves, in their own well-being, they are going to break. They are going to get sick. I'm not trying to give moms cancer or anything like that at all, but it's true. You can't spend 25 years of your life just working for others and come out the other end and go, okay, now I'm going to focus on, it just doesn't work that way. That transition is not a reliable transition. And again, it's not to be selfish. It's to care about your loved ones. It's accountability again, to like this I have to do for me and you guys have to allow this so I can make sure that I'm there for you as much as I want to be, and maintain that system and not create a system of just withdrawals, but you have to have some investment. I totally agree with that. And what a challenging thing to try to illustrate for somebody because you tell a mom that she should take time away from her kids to invest in herself and you're going to get that response like the hell I am.
Well, live and learn, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But really though, why take all this on, Jay? I mean, you've got enough to do. A thriving business. Why take on this thing? Is this a risk for you to focus your attention on these secondary and tertiary things?
Thanks for that question. I'm 66 years old and I'm clearly burned out when it comes to the day-to-day demands on running the business. So I've stepped away from that. And I'm still really engaged. I mean, my heart is still very much with the company. And while, I get drawn into operational things occasionally, but what I'm really interested in is who are we being as a company? Who are our people being invited to be? And how does this thing scale? And, I guess you could blow this off as some Maslowian kind of craziness, but honestly, it goes back to the screw machine operator in Ohio. I want to be a place that people flourish. And I want when they go home for them to be the catalyst for their families to flourish. And let's dream a little further. As we get better and better at that, those families go out into their communities, ripples in the pond, you can, of course, see I'm trying to draw. And it's so, what? Wake the world.
Yeah.
Gee, I mean, we'll never be done doing that. But if we can enlist 100, 1,000, 100,000 people who are perhaps a little bit further along on their own aliveness, then they'll make their own ripples. And, I'm sorry to sound like a broken record here, but capitalism can be an engine for aliveness.
Yeah.
And I think it should be. I mean, why not? It's damn good business. Yeah. And we leave the world a better place.
Yeah, I totally agree, and creating that level of inspiration, creating dignity. Come on. How many businesses think about creating dignity in their employees? That pays big dividends. And when we talk about the bigger, more complicated social problems, oftentimes our and I'm not trying to draw you into a political conversation. I just want to use politics as an example. But people will say, make sure you get out and vote. get out and vote. That's the end of the line. That's when all the decisions have been made and you're saying yes, no to something. Like civically involved. You talk about accountability and moms. Go be accountable in your community. Go get involved even with your kids and go whatever it is. Garden at the local garden plots and create a food bank for people or what. I'm not whatever. I'm not going to stop making examples, but there's so many ways to get civically involved and invest some aliveness into your community. Because I'll tell you right now, the mayor, wherever you're at, needs help. They have volunteer positions open and they're desperate for someone to come in and be engaged with the government that they've got. And if we took time and invested in that, and you kind of said that, talking about like being, out there and doing these things, these ripples, imagine the impact one person could have over the course of their life in their small little town by just simply donating, let's say 2,000 hours over the course of 20 years of their time. That's a whole work year of somebody. Working 40 hours. And then you can multiply that by people in the community. And all of a sudden you've got this vibrant, civically engaged population. There's nothing in a positive way. There's nothing that tops that. That is a fantastic way to build a community that cares about one another, that knows one another, and can really drive that aliveness thing forward. And that's, they need all these little machines that are creating aliveness, whether it's Tuthill or the Little League or whatever it is. You're creating these moments.
No, that's exactly the spirit that energizes me, and I hope to be playing a little piece of that.
Right.
But let's have a little fun here. Let's say that magically tomorrow morning, the spirit of aliveness descends on Washington, D.C. What's different?
Oh, boy. A lot of things. A lot of things, right? Like aliveness, you didn't say Republican or Democrat, You're talking about we, us, all of us. We could definitely, and this is always going to be true, but we could definitely use a little less partisanship and work on, what's a true bipartisan thing, a problem that we could solve, and right now we struggle to do that because we're a bunch of jerks to one another.
Well, partisanship, by my definition anyway, is ego-driven.
Yeah.
And if we could, again, this is magic here, but if we could simply dispense with that, and we got a bunch of smart people that no longer have to be paying homage to their parties, but they can actually work together to find the best answers for the country.
Yeah.
And if they do that well, their reelection is going to get taken care of. But that should not be part of what they think about. They should be always in search of the best answers. I don't mind sounding a little naive here, but I just want to have that out there as a goalpost or maybe a yardstick for us to just dream about what's possible.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. Okay, so let's peer into the future a little bit. You don't get to talk about Search for Aliveness because you're doing that now. And obviously that's going to grow and become its own thing. But when you peer out there as an industry leader, what do you see? What are things that you want to maybe get to one day that you can't even really put your hands on yet?
Well, yeah, that's a challenging question, but I'll give you this much.
Perfect.
When we started this, I guess I'd use 2004 as perhaps our earnest beginning. We felt alone, and the funny thing is, the better we understood what we were up to, the more people we found out there with a similar hunger. And I really believe that, and not just in the United States, because we've done 3-day retreats all over the world, and it's unbelievable. Sometimes the path to get there is different, but the final destination, which is the heart, and asking people to not just listen to their hearts, but trust them. You can use the word intuition, you can use your word, but for me it's heart. That this is, I think it's a classic grassroots movement. And it's a passionate one because it's coming from deep within each of us. And so I actually think that this bodes very positively, it bodes well for our futures. And that all we want is more and more people listening to their hearts, leaning into that, and helping to wake the world.
I got one more question for you, and I'm going to try to pull something out for that middle manager, that person who's out there trying to struggle to be a better version of where you're at. And so you're sort of in mentor role now. But that person who's in a corporation that isn't alive, or they don't find it, and they're maybe going to transition into something else, but they've still got a job to do. They still got people whose livelihoods depend on their leadership. What's your advice for them when they're sort of just stuck and they're not in the best place, but they want to do what they can do? What does someone like that do, Jay?
Well, if I'm answering with their best interests at heart, it sounds a lot like that accountability conversation. This isn't working for you, and let's find a different job, or we'll help you find a different place. Because you just got to understand, we're really serious about this, and look around. We've got an ever-increasing percentage. We take a step back every now and then, but an almost ever-increasing percentage of folks who are really showing themselves to be in on this deal. So it would be that kind of conversation. For my own selfish interests, my own interests at heart, one of the tough lessons that we've learned along the way, particularly where you have people in influential roles, whether they're org chart influential roles or water cooler influential roles. If you've got people sitting around saying, don't drink that Kool-Aid, they're just out to screw you. You know what? It's so easy. It's so easy for them, because all they're really saying is, hey, wait, what we all know, we're all adults here, what we know is normal. I mean, this is crazy stuff. Let's go back to normal.
Right.
And of course, I'm there howling it with every chance I get. Hey, wait. This normal behavior, how about we get back to natural behavior without all the lessons we've learned from society along the way, giving us rules that may or may not fit who we really are.
I love it. Right there. Let's just call that the show. Man, thank you so much for coming on, Jay. That was powerful. And I love that you were available to do this and to continue to spread that message. It speaks volumes about your company, but also about who you are and how you run it. I love it, man. I think it's incredible what you're doing. Please keep doing it. Don't be dissuaded. Every day it's going to be hard, but keep doing it, because you're doing something truly unique and incredible.
Well, Pete, thank you very much. It's important to hear those words. But I was going to say something very similar to you. The energy that you bring to the show, it's this understanding, sponsoring. We can make this a better world kind of an energy.
Yeah.
And for you to be taking that into the Middle East, that's terrific. For you to be sharing it in exercises like the one we're just completing, man, keep it up.
All right, you got it. I'm gonna.
Good deal.